session. Okay, it started. Now I'll share my screen. Okay. Yeah. So we were looking at this example. Now everybody can see my screen, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we
Yes,
have
yes.
cool. So we have see right now in this session we will not talk about a lot about CSS, but very minimal one which we're using in JavaScript. In the next session, which is for like CSS for D3, there we will talk about specific properties of D3, like CSS elements, which you are going to mostly use while working with the graphs. But here you need to know like few basic uh, like convention and basic like attributes which we're using. So in this we have a class called dot, right? And if you see what is this dot is basically it's a div element class. So we are creating a, so whenever we click on the window, we are creating a div element called dot, and we are giving a class name as dot, and we are setting the style left. So what is this? This is like left and top. So left is basically like if you're on this page, right? If you're on this page, what is the exact offset on the x coordinate of this page? That is the left. So you are setting the left and event dot page x. So what is this page x? It is basically nothing. It's just like the current position. So if you see, let's say if I am my cursor is here, right? So this distance is page x, event x. So event.pagex is this. Event.pagey is this. If I move here, my cursor, now this one is event.pagex. So pagex value is the x coordinate length, right? And we're just subtracting 4. It's just for, because we have a border radius of 4 pixel. So that will additionally add a boundary to that, your div element. So that's why you're subtracting by 4. And then we are appending that dot object, or you can say the div object, to that specific position. So if I just click on this, you can see the dot, right? So this is like another example of how you can use, so you can see like how much information that which you can access under this event object. So you're having a page x and page y. So based on the position in a graph, you can perform any action and you can actually render some elements, right? So in this example, you just need to know how to dynamically create an element. Let's say you are building a graph, and when you click on something, you want to create another HTML element, might be a div or might be a span. So how you can do that? You can do with the help of create element, and you give some specific classes, and if you have the CSS set, then the styling on that like say div element or a specific DOM element will appear, and you can perform, and if you have added an event or if you added any action, let's say when you create that object. So let's say if you have a graph, and when you click on something, you want to do something, like you want to create another element for the visualization. So in that way you need to create dynamic element. So might be this example will help you to understand how you can do that. And basically I want to tell you like you can access the page x and page y with the event x with the current position in a web page. So this is just for that purpose. So these are like different set of events. I think we can look into the last one. This is also very minimal one. So this is when you focus on these two input text box, you display some dynamic text below in the form. So you have a p tag with input type text, and data help is this your full name, your age in year. So these are the placeholders, and you are trying to update this p tag id help based on the action on it. So what we are trying to do is basically we're adding a focus event on all the fields, right? So how we are getting all the fields, we are getting with the help of this document dot query selector all input. Now, one more important thing. Can anybody tell me like why we are using array dot from? Astha, who are familiar with JavaScript?
Not sure.
Ganesh?
I think, one sec. Can you field of array dot from fields, right?
Yeah.
Okay, it is. I think uh, it is creating an array of fields.
Mhm. So
Uh,
basically, if you see these fields right here,
yeah.
so
Yes.
these are like in the form of document notes. They are
Hmm.
not they're in the DOM object notation. They are not in an array, right? So you need an array format because then
Yeah.
only
So
you
it is
can.
creating an array.
Yes, so it's creating an
Hmm.
array from the DOM
Hmm.
nodes,
Okay. Okay.
right? So otherwise you cannot iterate using array. So that's the reason we use this convention. Now you are getting this field as an object. Now this field is a actually an input element, and whenever you get focus, you are trying to get. Now you can say like another, let's say key or attribute of event object, which is target dot get attribute. So we are trying to get the data help. We are trying to get the data help, this text. So this is the information will be given here, and then inside help we are updating the text. And the blur meaning like when you go out, when you like out focus that input text element. So when we go in, when we go out, in, out, in, out. So when we are in, the focus event will get triggered. When we're out, then blur event will trigger. So that's the basic convention. And what I want to tell you with this example is basically this one. So when you want to iterate the DOM nodes, you need to use array.from. Right? So might be sometime in the future you will have like multiple elements in HTML with the same type. So here we have input. So you might want to fetch it at once. So if you see query selector all, right? So it will fetch all the input elements. And now we want to iterate. So we can use array.from. And this is basically like iteration. Let field of this. This is an this is a syntax in ES6. Okay, so this is like more of like what event is now. Anybody has any doubt in events? Because you are not going to deal with like more than this an entire D3 journey.
Yeah. No doubts. Sort of. I understood the events.
Okay, Astha.
No doubts. I'm good with this.
Okay, and Raj, do you have any doubt?
Yeah, no, not as such. I'll practice and then
Okay,
if I have something, I'll get back to you. But it's more like Python. We create, fields like this in Python as well.
yeah. So Python doesn't have events. So Python is mostly a language where
Yeah,
you,
mostly, yeah.
yeah. So
Not
you, yeah,
no events, but yeah, we create new
yeah.
sets.
Yeah. So yeah, you can say that maybe a kind of syntax, but basically like JavaScript, what you need to understand is the DOM object. So what DOM object is, and when you have an event, like how you can add event to specific elements, and what is the efficient way of adding an event. Why to use event propagation? Why to use prevent default? These are two things is really important. And then you should also know how like what are the different type of properties or attributes which event object has that might be helpful for you to implement the interactivity for a D3JS graph. So this is like more overview of this events, and this is the more you can say the blueprint. These are the things we are going to use when building D3JS graphs. Or maybe like so why I want to go through this uh, because the initial requirement was when you see a complex code, uh, like especially building D3JS, you should be able to understand it, specifically when it comes to the JavaScript part of it. right? So the code base which you have seen, like according to you, it's like pretty big, but if I see it, it's very minimal one. You can build like really complex graph after this entire TCGS training. So now you understand like event, how it works, and I will share you all the examples with you so you can
Yes.
interact with it and see. So specifically for Raj, you just try it in the web browser, interact with the console, and see if you have any doubts, which we can discuss in next session. Because after this two
Yeah.
sessions, we will work mostly specifically on D3Js. So you can clear like all the doubts regarding like all the topics which we are going to discuss in the first two session.
Mm, sure. Sure. I'll
Okay,
do. Sorry.
okay, wonderful. So let me give you an example of a chaining. So if you see this example for you, might be it looks uh, might be look like really challenging, but what basically I'm going to tell you is a chaining. So you don't need to understand the entire syntax, but what you need to understand the concept behind it. So if you see the last line here, so we are just console.print. We're adding like some methods. So you can see you have dot sum, dot subtract, dot add, and dot value. Right. So how many of you are already familiar with class in JavaScript?
I
Class.
yeah.
Okay, Asta, you're familiar with, right? I think Ganesh is also familiar with. Okay, so classes. So basically, this is in JavaScript. There is no, so you cannot say like JavaScript is object oriented. JavaScript is object based. So whatever you see, it's just like it's just a notation to write the way we used to write in other higher level programming languages using constructor, using methods and classes. But internally, it compiles down into the functions in JavaScript, which is like through the JavaScript engine. But at higher level, this is a blueprint. So now if you see, you have a class called arithmetic. You have a constructor which has a variable, or you can say the class variable called value, and we have method called sum. So sum takes a number of arguments. So when we say dot dot this, right, this is a ES6 notation. So you are taking number of arguments, so an array of arguments. And what you do is basically you use reduced, right? So this is the pre-built functions in JavaScript. So what it does, it takes sum and current. So sum is initialized to 0, right? And it iterate through all the arguments. So if you see, we have we have a class. We are creating a class. We have a object here A, and in this object we are passing A dot sum, and number of argument is 136. Right? So these are like number of arguments. So now we are going to iterate 1, 3, and 6. So the argument dot reduce. So this argument will be an array of these values, which is 1, 3, and 6. Now we are going to reduce this function. Reduce will iterate inside, and it takes the sum value as 0 initially, and it takes the current value as 1 first. So 1, so this is like 0 plus 1 is 1. Then 3 will go. Now the current will become 1. So 1 plus, sorry, sum will become 1, and 1 plus 3 will become 4. So this is just like adding all the elements, right? So 3 plus 1 plus 6 is 10. So this method will return an object, right? And this value 1, 3 plus 6, the 10 value will get stored in this, which is a class value. And then we are subtracting 3. So this that value, if you see subtract 3 will go here. It will subtract 3, which is like now it's 7. Then we are adding 4. The 7 plus 4 is 11, right? And then we are trying to print the value, right? So the value will be 11, right? So if we want to run this, Okay, so this is chain.js. So you can see the output is 11. So I'm running with the help of Node. So Node can understand the syntax. So the output is 11. So this is a kind of chaining example. So you are not going to necessarily use the same syntax like this classes, methods, but you can use. But the mostly what I want to tell you about is like how you can pass the result of one action to another action, which is called a chaining. So this is like chaining of a method. If you see your examples in D3JS, which you can see like you are using a chaining a lot, right? So what chaining does is basically perform this operation, and whatever the output is, so that mostly it's an object. So that object is passed to, like we're calling another action, and then similarly the output of this. So it happens like one by one. So it doesn't start from the right, it start from the left. So that's a chaining concept in JavaScript. Anybody have doubt in this?
No, sir.
Okay, Raj.
No, not really.
Okay,
I'm
perfect.
good.
Okay, Asta.
No, no doubts.
Okay, perfect. So we have seen till now like what events are and how to write events on the top of your HTML elements, and what are the different way to make sure we write optimum events so we don't disturb the entire DOM if we are specifically writing a event for a specific HTML element or single HTML element. And then we went through the chaining. So how like chaining of methods work in JavaScript, and also we have seen the chaining of objects, attributes also, which is like document.body.head, like when you want to access the DOM object. Okay, so there's another example which will get you familiar with JavaScript. So we want to build a timer, right? Countdown timer. So let me show you an example. So you can see it's 4, then 3, 2, 1, done, right? So we want to build a timer. So this example is just for you to understand some piece of JavaScript concept called closure. So what basically closure is? So when you so think about, there are two terms in JavaScript: higher order function and closure, right? So when you define a function inside a function, it's basically a higher order function. So what does that mean? It means like you are trying to uh, like simulate a behavior. So this is a timer. You can assume, you can compare this thing as like if you want to implement something in Java. So you will create a class called timer, and you will create a method called countdown, right? And then you will perform some action, like from every second you will wait and you will display the value. So similar concept if you want to achieve in JavaScript, you are going to write a function inside a function. So we are having a timer where we are taking the number of seconds. So let's say we are taking 5 seconds as an example, and we have initialized a variable called countdown, which is outside of timer. Now I will tell you like why it is outside of timer, why it is not inside, because this is a global object, which countdown will have a track of the time which is globally accessible in this entire timer.js. So what we are doing is basically get the current date time, and then we are getting the next time, the so current time, and the next time we are getting it with the then, and then we are performing called set interval. So set interval is basically which execute things in a specific interval. So let's say you want to display hello world every second, right? So you want to do it for every second, then you will do it like for, this is like 1000 millisecond, which is equivalent to 1 second. So you're passing the time period here. So what's the difference between set timeout and set interval? So set timeout is it wait for some specific duration, and then it execute the body of set timeout. But in set interval, it execute at a specific interval. So it's a recurring thing. but when you clear the interval, then it stops. So that's where, if you see, we clear the interval. So this set interval is assigned to this countdown, and when we clear this, then this set of action, the continuous, or you can say the periodic action of interval will stop once you clear the interval. So this is like how much seconds are left. We print that in seconds. So we are just converting the time into second, and then if the second left is 0, we just clear the interval and we stop the timer. So you need to understand, like, that's why we have used this countdown here. And let's see this example again. So this now and then is basically in so this is in milliseconds. This is like specific format in JavaScript, and then we are converting into second and we're printing the timer. So if you start from 6, you can see the 5-second timer. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So yeah, so the intention of this example is for you to familiar with few core concept, which is like clear interval and set interval. So nothing much which might be required for D3JS, but yes, you might can see some of the animation which you might be forming some advanced D3JS graph. So mostly all the animation, uh, when you want to perform some specific duration or periodic interval, you use set interval. So you should know like how to set the interval and how to clear the interval when you stop that action, which is recurring action. Yeah. So anybody has any doubt in this timer implementation? No. Okay. Raj?
So,
No,
Saurav, I do have a doubt here.
Yeah, Ganesh.
So you're saying set interval and function, right? You're calling the function here.
Yes.
So, it's nothing but this interval is being set from this particular function, right? Then date dot now by thousand. This is nothing but an interval, right? I mean, this will
Yes.
automatically start.
Yes. Yes. Date. So date dot now is it's a value. It's a time. It's a
Mhm.
current time,
Yeah.
right? It will get the current date time in a
Mhm.
format. So in a format,
Okay.
it's a specific notation. I forget it. It's just like you have millisecond notation, right? So something like
Yeah.
that. So you're getting now and then. So that time period you're converting inside set interval. So if you see the highlighted part, right? So this is the body of set interval. So you want to execute. So this set interval means you want to execute this body every 1 second. You are given 1000, right? 1000 millisecond.
Yeah.
So this body will execute like every 1 second. So
Mm.
what we are trying to update, we are updating the seconds left, right?
Mm.
Because this is something which is keep decreasing. So because you can
Mm.
see we are subtracting from then, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
now this is something which is, so you can see the console log appears once, right?
Yeah.
After that, this is keep happening, right?
Mm.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, so this is a higher order function in JavaScript when you decide a function, define a function inside a function. And here we are using like a set interval properties to making sure we update the logic for second left, like the remaining time which we want to print. So we're using that. And when we want to stop this, when the second left becomes 0 and we want to clear the time interval. So once you clear, then your timer will stop. So the two things are really important. So this is mostly used in animation. Let's say if you have a moving object on your web page, right? So you want to make an animation of like say a moving, so man is moving, right? So you want to change the legs movement. So in that case, you want to perform some animation. So you can set that animation. You can do that with the CSS3 as well, with the keyframe animation, but you can achieve the same thing in JavaScript as well. So when you want to recur, like do some recurring event or recurring animation in JavaScript, you prefer to use set interval.
Right. Right. Got it.
Yeah. Raj and Asta, do you have any doubt?
No.
Okay. So,
no, sir.
okay, perfect. So there are a few other examples. I think you must be using this for each, and you must have seen an example which I've shared. So okay, let's see if you can understand this entire syntax. So how many of you can understand this entire syntax? Just read it for like 1 minute and let me know.
So, Saurabh, I can't see your screen.
Uh, can Ganesh, you and Asta, you can
Yes, yes, yes. I'm able to.
I can.
maybe Raj, you have some network problem.
Yeah, got it. Got it.
Okay. Yeah. So maybe yeah. So it's question for Astha and Ganesh. So can you understand this entire syntax?
Just but yeah, because I mean I could understand this, Sorrow. It's just
Mhm,
that you're invoking an array and calling all the elements of that array or creating an array using this first function,
mhm.
and then you're printing that result into this.
Okay. Can you tell me like how this filter works?
Mm,
So what is this like? What will be the output of this?
even so, you're also showing us the output below. I don't know whether that could be an output, but
No, no, no.
um,
I have yeah. So I have not print the output. So
but
basically,
but then yeah, yeah.
yeah. So I'm trying to filter out something. So if there is an even, right, an
Even
even
number.
numbers, right? So we're trying to filter the even numbers. So we're building a filter. Okay. So Astha, are you familiar with this syntax?
And the filter part, I'm not.
I'll just go step by step because this might be useful for you. So we are creating a filter, and what basically filter does, it's taking two inputs. So one is an array of values and then a context. So what does that context mean? So context is like we are giving a function or method which will return true and false based on the value which we pass. If it is even, it returns true. If it is odd, it returns false. Right now, if it is odd and even, if it is true and false, based on that we want to filter out. So if you see this one, we are passing an array here, we are passing a function. So this is a function which is passed here. So basically what we are doing is, you can see this entire selected function is passing here. Then we have a result output, like initially we initialize as an empty array, and then we're iterating, we're using each. So what this each does, it takes an array and it takes this action, right? Now this action, so we are iterating through every value inside for each. We are iterating through every value inside an array, and we are passing each value of an array to an action. So what is action? Action is this, right? So if you just let me just write more clear for you, it will look like this. So what is action? Action is this, right? So basically it takes an element which is an array of I. So basically we will pass one, right? And this will pass to a context. So what is this context? Is this, so one will be passed to this function. We check if it is even, so it will say false. If it is false, we don't append to it. If it is true, we append to it. That's it. So we append only for even numbers. So let me show you let's run this node basics node filter. So you can say we got 246, right? So basically, you will see a lot of syntax like for each, or maybe filter for even odd. So not for even odd, but maybe for different other categories. When you're plotting D3JS graph, you if you build some filters for your graphs, you might use like a function. You're passing a function inside a function. So this function takes function as an, you can see this function taking as a function as an your arguments. So this is when when you pass a function to a function, that is called closure in JavaScript. So you have seen higher order function with an example of timer, and this is with a filter. You can see an example of a closure. Not a closure, sorry, a callback. So this is a callback when you're passing a function to a function. So this function, why it is callback? This because you are not calling this function here, you are calling it here, right? So it is called back, like later inside filter. So you might see a lot of syntax in other people examples in JavaScript code where you will have a function and you will pass it to another function, right? So basically it's very easy to understand this code if you go step by step. You see what's the input, what's arguments you're passing, and how this method is working. So it is each, what it does, it take an action or maybe a function, and that function is applied on every input in an array, right? So how you're passing an array, you're passing an array here. Now each input, now that what is an action to perform, that action you're passing is an even context, which is this. Then that will be a check, and based on the output of this, you do append the element to your resultant array, right? Does that clear? Does the syntax make more sense now for everybody? Ganesh,
Yes,
Raj,
sir.
Yes, 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 sir.
Asta?
Yes.
Yes, it's clear now.
Okay, so you might see a lot of code bases like this when you pass function to another function in JavaScript, because this is a more standard way of doing it right now. Because when you don't want to call a function at the instant you define it, so you want to call it based on some different other action. So that's where the callback comes into picture. Okay, so this is the one example I want to show you. And okay, so this is another basic example.
Huh? Yeah, Anchi?
Yeah. So are you guys familiar with prototype, Asta?
అది ఇది అయిపోయింది పిండి అయిపోయింది అది.
Yeah.
Prototype, yes,
Okay.
I could recall some bit.
Okay. Can you tell me like what it does? Like what's the use case and why we need it?
So it's something related to objects that we create for inheritance. So
Okay.
to call that and access that object.
Yeah. So basically it uses to extend a specific. So why we use inheritance? Inheritance is basically used to extend the functionality from the parent. Right, and we want to define a specific property for a child to it. So similarly, prototype in JavaScript help you to extend the behavior of parent objects. So if you see here prototype, you are all familiar with how the concat works, right? If you have a string called a hello and b world, right? And you want to concat the two strings, a dot concat b, right? So output will be hello world. But what if you want to change the behavior of the default concat method, right? So you can do something like string dot prototype, because this is a string. So you want to update the concat functionality. So when you pass another object, you return the second object, you add the second object first, right? And then the first one. So b plus this. So in that way, the output will be world hello. So if I show you an example, you can see the world hello will be the example. So default is hello world, but so so you can see the power of JavaScript. It allow you to override the behavior, which is the which is the default behavior of functions in JavaScript. So yeah, so I think we have this session will be uh, have, a, only less than a minute. So, I have one more example to cover. So
So
I will
can
share. Yeah, Raj.
yeah, we can use prototype for any function, or
Yes,
it
yes,
can be
yes.
used for some
Any method,
specific function.
any method. So you're adding it to the object,
Yeah.
right? So let's say you have an array. So array, you want to add a custom method to array object, you can do that. So basically, it is used to extend the current functionality, or maybe like adding more functionality to the existing objects. So it can be array, it can be string, it can be anything else. It can be a custom object as well. Okay,
Okay.
so might be I think this I
Thank.
need to send you one more link because this session is going to get over anytime soon. Okay, so you understand, like anybody has any doubt? Raj, Astha, Ganesh, any doubt so far?
No doubts, sort of, for me.
Okay,
No, no.
okay, perfect.
No doubt.
So let me show you one more example of closure example. So you will be familiar with some more core fundamental of JavaScript. So we have a method called sum. You can see this method where I have a function, I have a definition, which is a function. And inside this, I have created a variable called counter. And inside this, I'm returning a function.